Today's video is brought to you by Loud Ass Speakers. Stay tuned to the end of the video to hear more about Loud Ass Speakers and their amazing, affordable products. So, Megaten has a ton of cool protagonists. No one can deny that. You got your Hibikukuses, Doom Guys, Tamaki Uchidas, etc. and so on. But the fan favorite and personal favorite for sure has to be Raidou Kuzunoha. He looks cool, is cool, distinct from the other Megaten protags, and has appeared in a few Megaten games outside of his own. And the games he's in are great, as long as it isn't his debut title. Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner Raidou Kuzunoha vs. the Soulless Army. Yeah, it's not that good. This game sucks, kinda. The story? Rad. Characters? Rad. Setting, art direction, and music? All rad. Gameplay? It's not horrible, but it ain't winning any awards either. Even though the story, characters, setting, and all those other things I mentioned are outstanding, it just lacks both the fun gameplay loop and the mechanical depth present in other Megaten titles, holding the game back substantially. Games like Strange Journey are mechanically deep and super fulfilling experiences, whereas games like SMT4 have an engaging gameplay loop, creating for an enjoyable experience. Raidou 1 though? Well, from its real-time combat, demon usage, exploration, navigation, world, all of it's just
It's alright.
Before I inevitably throw more gameplay terms you guys have likely no recollection of, I do have to explain what the hell a Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner Raidou Kuzunoha vs. the Soulless Army, or Raidou 1 as I'll be calling, is as a whole, you know? So, Raidou 1, it's one of the many PS2 Megaten games released in March of 06. It's got a lot of the staff who had worked on previous and future installments in the franchise, plus a new take on the Devil Summoner subseries and even Megami Tensei as a whole. You boot up as Raidou Kuzunoha the 14th, the next in a well-respected line of Devil Summoners, doing your duty as a Devil Summoner to protect the capital. Aside from being a Devil Summoner, you also have to play the role of a detective at the Naomi Detective Agency, using those mythical creatures to reach the bottom of rather grisly cases, and damn do they get grisly. You also have to deal with demonic cases that no mere human would be capable of handling, and as your title suggests, you'll have to fight fire with fire. But, unlike Raidou's Megaten brethren, you're required to deal with your demonic foes hand-to-hand in some real-time action RPG combat. A first for the series and something they've yet to attempt since. As an ARPG, you can't solely rely on stats to get by, but if you have the skills, you'll be able to avoid any and all damage. It makes the foes you fight even more spectacular than typical RPGs and Megaten titles, though it's not a complete gameplay departure from its parent series. It uses similar demon raising and fusion mechanics to the prior games, and it utilizes the Devil Summoner style demon raising, which I'll get into in a bitty. But enough on the story and basics of the gameplay. Let's get a bit nitty gritty with the latter's details. Like I've mentioned, Raidou 1 is an ARPG. It uses real-time combat, so you'll have to avoid enemy attacks as well as dish out damage. You know YouTube has a 10-second skip button. Just thought I'd let you know about that. Ahem. Anyways, as Raidou, you got a basic 3-hit combo, dash stab, sword spinneroonie move, guard, and gun. Tools you'll use to dispatch your demonic foes, and by doing so, you can also gain experience to level up, allowing for a stronger Raidou and epic selection of demons. Oh yeah, demons. Devil Summoner. Demons come in a few ways, such as random encounters, forced encounters with slightly tougher foes, and unique, challenging boss fights, all of which have a variety of attack options. Close-range physical skills, close to long-range magic skills, ailment-inducing magic, weaknesses, and resistances to consider, and these also apply to the demons you use as a Devil Summoner in combat. You can summon one demon in battle, switching them out at any time, control their actions to be either broad or specific, level them up to increase their move pool, using them more to increase their loyalty, use them for fusion for mega epicer demons, getting new demons to inherit moves they wouldn't likely have, and, you know, other very specific things that I probably get that have a 1% chance of happening anyways. To get these demons, you get them in battle by using their weaknesses to leave them open, either to get stronger hits in, or to suck them into your tube. You have to be a level equal or greater to them to do so, or it won't work. Demons are your backbone in combat, but they're also your backbone, you know, in general as a Devil Summoner. Demons are also used outside of combat in the overworld. They can use their special order skills to get information and proceed with the case, or demon skills to reach areas Raidou couldn't on a solo mission. Also, reach into the chest that Raidou cannot for some reason. I don't know why they did this, and I haven't figured out, but I just thought I'd mention it, I guess. It's weird. But lastly, we got exploration and overworld navigation. You have to travel from city to city in the capital, or I guess area to area in the capital, and obtain information, looking for clues, and investigating people, fighting enemies along the way most of the time. Most of the areas in the game have Dark World equivalents, nearly the same in design aside from a few instances, and contain harder enemies. As the game goes on, you'll get means of reaching more areas in the game, both for story progression and to explore for extra goodies. Also on the occasion, you'll have to navigate dungeons fit with their own gimmick, and the parts of the game where shit gets way more intense. On paper, this stuff is cool, and it still is, but as I've alluded to, not all of it pans out well. Once again, the writing, setting, and music all kick butt. But the gameplay that makes this game stand out so much is just undercooked, creating for a rather uninteresting gameplay experience, and I'd like to finally get into why that's the case. If you're beating the snot out of some dudes, jumping on platforms or drifting around corners, no matter the game, the most important thing you want to have first and foremost are nice controls. Sure, there could be interesting and unique game design under pretty weird or straight up horrible controls, but the first thing you'll notice when you play a game for the first time are the controls. Think of them like a first impression with your significant other's parents. When meeting them, you want to make yourself look good, and that could be the start of an even greater relationship, but sometimes if things end up going south, you've either got a lot of convincing to do, or you've ruptured a potentially great relationship. And if I were dating Raidou 1's controls and I invited them to meet my parents over dinner, Raidou 1 would try to bring the dinner from the kitchen, but drop the main course of Thanksgiving like turkey on the floor, face first, and it's like splattered everywhere. And the dog is coming to eat it. So yeah, it doesn't exactly, stick the landing. And it also continues to fumble during the dinner, what's left of there, thanks to a pretty piddling moveset. What I'm trying to get at here is that the controls and small moveset Raidou has impacts the combat by making most encounters repetitive and frustrating, resulting in a game that feels longer than it should be. The best way I'd end up describing Raidou's control in this game are akin to a shopping cart with that one wonky wheel on it. It's functional for the most part. Sure, it's not the most efficient thing around, but it works for the most part. But when, let's say you're trying to move in an awkward direction or move back to pick up that jar of pickles you want, you'll start to really notice that one wheel, and as you continue to shop, it just becomes more noticeable and irritating. Weirdly specific metaphor, I know, but this is pretty much just how I feel about controlling Raidou. You can adjust to his stiff combos, guarding, movement speed, and lack of a proper dodge, but never does it feel good to control, and it's something you'll notice more as the game progresses. Speaking about a lack of proper dodge, Raidou's moveset is not easy to compare to a shopping cart, so I'll skip the weird metaphors and just get into it. Raidou's moveset friggin' sucks in this game. Like the controls, you could adjust to it, but due to a rigid guard, lack of dodge, or other combat options to deal with enemies, the combat just never feels right. Something is always missing, and while you could put up with it, you'd really wish you have some more combat options in your kit, aside from maybe one thing I'll get into later. Aside from creating a rather mediocre combat system, the stiff controls and static movement have a huge impact on the enjoyability of the game in the long run, because Raidou 1 is not a short game. The overabundance of disposable battles, poor controls, and stagnant movement. The combat easily overstays its welcome. Raidou just frankly sucks to control in this game, and you'll have to be doing that a lot here, because that's what you're going to be doing. If Raidou himself ain't versatile in combat, then what about the demons you got? Well, they're a little better, kinda. Is typically in a lot of SMT games, your protagonist is not much more than a support and uses their demons as a way of making up for their ineffectiveness, thus creating a variety in combat encounters, like Strange Journey for example. In that game, your protagonist isn't really the strongest or most versatile around, but he can get some pretty sick demons, and how you choose to customize your party ends up being one of the most fun and replayable parts of that game. Go see my Strange Journey video, as it gets a lot more in depth there than I will here, and so you could respect Strange Journey more, which is the best game in the series, next to Persona 4. So if that was the intent in Raidou, to have your demons do most of the heavy lifting while you focus on support, it explains Raidou himself being pretty disposable in combat, right? Well, in Raidou 1, due to a limited stock of demons, situations requiring detective skills, etc., the game de-incentivizes demon experimentation, impacting the combat and exploration of the game heavily. At the start of Raidou 1, you do not have access to hold on to a good amount of demons, and as the game goes on, you'll be granted access to hold on to a greater supply of demons. So at the start, experimentation is pretty much out the window until you got the tubes to make up for it. Compounding this issue of limited tubage is that the demon, more often than not, required for rather uninteresting detective work used to progress the story, and each of these moments when you're meant to do detective work requires a single solution dependent on the special order skill of the demon. So if you don't have that right demon, you might just be screwed. And because of these detective bits and limited tubes, it typically makes fusing demons a rather risky choice, seeing as, oh, I don't want to fuse this, what if I need its ability later? And if that ends up happening, which will happen the first timers, it could take a really hefty sum of Maka to get the demon with the ability you need. This ends up encouraging the player to closely grip onto the demon they have, until they know they could safely get a counterpart capable of doing the same actions as well as stunting the player's experimentation with demons by gaining progression behind a one-for-all solution. And I've got a lot of issues with this, as I said. It limits one of the series' greatest features by de-incentivizing demon experimentation by gating progression, but also just creates a big backtracking issue, which, leads me into the whole world navigation and exploration part, which is one of my favorite things to do in most, if any RPG. It lets me get invested in the setting presented to me, and I could potentially find really good rewards through exploring. A lot of RPGs do this to varying degrees of success. As for where Raidou 1 falls, not very good. And it's for a lot of good reasons too, some that relate back to what I've said earlier and some new issues, but basically, because of the large amount of random encounters and mediocre combat, it creates a situation in which you want to avoid world navigation and exploration, and it further causes combat to overstay its welcome. Raidou 1 is a game very limited on the safe zones, areas without any encounters, a staple of the RPG genre. And this doesn't happen much in Raidou. I can count the amount of times there are safe areas in Raidou on a single hand. As this implies, you'll be seeing enemies a lot throughout the game, and once again, experiencing the most mid of action RPG combat. Almost every area in this game, Dark World or not, has random encounters, all cranked up to a ridiculously high degree. But like other RPGs, Raidou 1 also has a good amount of beneficial secrets to find, as well as NPCs to talk to get further world building, and possible hints of what to do next. It's definitely a thought out setting, but since you're not allowed to walk 5-10 steps without getting into a battle with a system you're likely tired of, you'll do your best to just do the bare minimum of exploration the game wants, rarely ever going out of your way to find secrets or get engrossed in the world, because you'll always find yourself appear in some sort of battle. By not really having areas that are safe zones or towns per se, the world as it is just never gets a chance to stand on its own, with enemies almost always appearing. Also, by having the encounters be so heavily intertwined with the world, it creates a situation when you're either going to the shop or Gomaden where you just want to be in and out, because even in the main sort of hub area, you're not safe at all. Even into the late game, these low-level Andes are just as frequent as they were in the beginning of the game. And since the game has dungeons, however few there may be, it's kind of weird to treat the overworld as being very enemy-infested like dungeons. It kind of just, makes the two mesh together, as I said. The game never really gives you a chance to breathe and just not fight anything. The world never really gets to be itself for the most part. It's there, you could work with it, but it's just a lot of combat, and one that's not very good again. I know I've been beating this game's balls pretty hard today, and I know I should stop, but I thought I should get across my much minor complaints with the gameplay that I couldn't really give a full section of its own. Starting with Raidou's gun, it's so dumb. In concept, it's pretty smart. It's meant to give Raidou elemental and even ailment options in combat. However, due to the amount of bullets you can carry at the start for each bullet type, it's so limited, and you'll have to buy a clip extension for each bullet type. I think that's pretty cool thinking about it now, but if there's one thing that still makes me really dislike the gun is that the bullets are treated as their own attack type, meaning you could unknowingly be hitting an enemy with their weakness and just not know they're impervious to bullets, or physical attacks, I guess, because every bullet, I guess, is considered a physical attack and an element attack at the same time, and just not an element attack. It's weird. Moving on from that, money feels way too limited for its own good. I feel like things are pretty fairly priced for the most part, but the enemies you fight just don't give you enough to either pay for items, get demons from the compendium, pay for healing among other money related things. It's just, Raidou's on a budget, I guess that makes sense if he's still in high school, and I guess he's a part-time worker at the fucking detective agency, in spite of him doing all of the stuff he does. Also, not a fan of the really small cap on items. I get that it's meant to prevent players from just tanking damage with the fights, but with them being pretty long in certain cases, those limited item stocks can become very irritating in particular cases. I think it would have been cooler to see if it were you could increase carrying capacity as the game goes on. Like how they do with the bullets, you can get more item slots, and I think that would have been a good way to deal with that as the game goes on. Magnetite is also pretty useless in the long run, but I'm glad it's easily ignored, seeing as I already have a lot of issues with this game, and having to deal with mag is something I don't feel like dealing with. Also, demon AI is kind of strange, and the options you're given to control them aren't wide enough. It works, but it never feels right. I guess similar in a way to Raidou's control, I guess. Also, this is coming from the same guy who thinks that Persona 3 Fez is the best Persona 3 version, and not portable, but I will save that for a later date. And lastly, having to get demons through a button mashing game is quick and efficient, but not as charming or interesting compared to Negotiations. Like, I'm glad it doesn't have that RNG factor, but there could have been something a little more interesting. But, you know, I've been pretty hard on this game today. I know I've said that like once already, and I'm gonna say it again. But let me talk about something I really do like about this game. Megaten titles have always done a pretty damn solid job of making enjoyable dungeons to explore. Even in my least favorite title, the series has consistently been able to make fun, enjoyable dungeons to explore, and I'd say Raidou is one of these titles that makes me hold this sentiment. Although there aren't too many specific dungeons, the ones that are there are all unique and have their own set of challenges to get past, making for some memorable moments. Now, since I didn't have the time to get into the later dungeons in the game, on this playthrough, I still hold the sentiment that, yeah, these dungeons are the best part of the game. Example, so early on into the game, you have to save a bunch of these factory workers in a barricade dungeon, where you'll have to find out which walls are and aren't capable of being passed through. And Raidou does a pretty solid job with this dungeon. It's one big dungeon separated into 3 unique areas, so it's not overwhelming in the slightest, and so you have a rather small but still challenging set of areas to explore for the factory workers. Well, it's something the series isn't at all familiar with. The dungeon exploration in this game is good and should go credited.
Get ready!
Now it's time to get into what you guys had to say about Raidou 1 and its combat. I left a poll about a week or two ago going over this game's combat, so let's see. 28% of you said good gameplay, 12% of you said bad gameplay, 3% of you said great gameplay, and 57% said decent gameplay. Let's get into the comments. D here says, love Raidou so much. Even if the combat can feel a bit repetitive, I just love mashing buttons and seeing the cool little text for my demons. But I do feel Raidou mostly lives for its style rather than gameplay. I'd have to agree there. I love like everything else about Raidou. It just the story, music, art, all that shit is so cool. But the gameplay, no thank you. Rayhan Harfi says, I only played Raidou Kuzunoha versus King Abaddon, and I think the gameplay is decent, the music is fantastic, and overall I give it an 8 out of 10. Understandable. Music is pretty good, even though some tracks sound like Persona 4, but I guess I know where you voted on the poll, so that's cool. But I think King Abaddon has really good gameplay, but I will leave that for another day. Tony For You says, fun at first, but very easily becomes repetitive. Yeah, I would have to agree. Hugbeast 2016 says, the gameplay is decent, but the demon summoning twist is nice, as well as the game's plot. Atmosphere and setting is so charming I could forgive the gameplay. It's good that more people are more tolerant of pretty, shallow and decent only mediocre-ish gameplay. They're willing to put up with that to just go through everything else the game has to offer. So that's cool. And I would have to agree about the demon summoning twist. It's definitely more interesting to see the demons used for a non-combat option. More practical uses, I guess, even as practical as doing detective work is, but it's something I don't really see much in the series, and nothing I could really remember now. Okay, I guess, says, only played a few minutes of it in an emulator. Enjoyed it though. Good for you, go play more of it. Hiho McGee says, always wanted to play it, but I never could. Instead I got DDS and was very disappointed. And that is a big fat agree right there. Visnetti says, Raidou awesome and cool and epic bacon. And he is right, I'm gonna give that heart. Then Tall Flip Kick says, it alright. I'm gonna give that a heart, and I'm gonna reply with, it lukewarm and tasteless. But it alright. And reply. And Mac here says, cool or something, which I'm gonna disagree with. Which is, it's not cool, it sucks. I hate it. I hate you. But yeah, I know the game, I know Raidou 1, something I've been beating pretty hard, right? I've been tough on Raidou, yeah, I know I said that. I know I said that twice, and I know I say all of this. But like many other games in the series, I've actually been able to have a lot more fun with this game on a second playthrough. And in spite of that sounding like a good thing, I think it's more so me being on New Game Plus and knowing how to avoid a few of the issues I've presented. Raidou Kuzunoha versus the Soulless Army is definitely a game I like a little more now. But my issues with this game have gotten slightly more apparent after writing the script. Believe it or not, I don't despise it as much as I did my first time through, but I also don't think it's still that good either. And, even after everything I've said, give the game a shot. It's got a dope story, sick music, great art direction, and a cool setting. And if you could put up with everything I've mentioned, then you'll be in for a nice time. And if you do, damn, do you have one hell of a sequel to look forward to. Anyways, this game's combat is still better than Secret of Mana, and good night. So Raidou may suck, but you know what doesn't? Today's sponsor, Loud Ass Speakers. They've got a wide range of speakers perfect for music, video making, gaming, watching movies, and plenty of other amazing uses. Loud Ass speakers are durable and strong, so no matter what it is you want to blast your eardrums off to heaven with, you surely can with these bad boys. And just like the Game Boy Color, Loud Ass speakers come in multiple awesome colors such as black, extremely dark gray, white, the number G, clear, and red. Oh, that's it. Well, I think that's more than enough colors, and if you think for some reason Loud Ass speakers lacks in color variety, they sure as hell make up for that in features. You got the usual mufflers, audio gain knobs, an automatic volume adjuster that lets you know what audio would sound like coming out of a variety of different devices, a dimmer switch if you think that your speaker is a little too loud, a fully functional art tablet, a booger. Personally, I love using head-ass speakers while listening to music, fighting for my life in the bathroom, listening to MF Doom, watching the ants on my desk fight, learning to play a new learning to play a new instrument, and too many to list that I've already forgotten the other things I do with loud-ass speakers. What an amazing product! Use the link in the comments or the code MyFatRock to get 20% off your last order, and on with the show. So, Megaten has a ton of cool protagonists. No one can deny that. You got your Hibikikuzes, Doom Guys, Tamaki Uchidas, etc. and so on. But the fan favorite and personal favorite for sure has to be